Now, next on stage, we have Plenary VIII panel discussion on a very interesting topic, creating the digital governance roadmap. May I please invite Mr. Ross James, founder and CEO at Cloud PLC, Ms. Retiana Bella, financial services professional, Advantage Reply, and Mr. Rahul Shukla, senior accountant director, LTI Mindtree UK, as our guest speakers, and Mr. Udyan Guha, former senior vice president, HCL Technologies Limited, as the chair and moderator for the session.
Thank you. Well, they put names. Okay. Good. So thank you, the organizers, for inviting us. I think after a very interesting discussion we had on, I think, the lease financing, NPI and others, I think we sort of are not that technical, but we are more, I think, qualitative. And what I really like as we go here, we know there's a big audience in the digital world, in the web world. We'd like to make this session more interactive, if that's okay. So we will sort of go with our opening remarks and our introductions, and that will be very helpful at some point. We make it interactive. Please ask questions. And if we make the session interactive, interesting for both you, for us, I think, so you get something out of it, we get something out of it. So if that's okay with the audience here, my humble request is please ask questions. We won't wait till the end, we'll make it interactive. Panel members, is that what we want? It's better for us and it's better for everyone. So I'm Udyan Guha. So my quick background is IIT Kanpur, did an MBA from LBS, started work in London with McKinsey. In the last 13 years, I was working at HCL, doing very large transactions in financial and non-financial services. That's my background. A lot of the theme I do, a lot of my experience is working with the large corporates in Europe and doing very, very large transactions. Transaction values anywhere between contract with 100 million to 500 million. So that's the kind of environment I come from. So I'll just let the panel members, as they come in, quickly introduce themselves, because we have people with a very interesting background, with Rahul from the technology world, Ritian from banking world, James from a world where he says, and he has a very interesting mission in life, and I'll not steal his thunder and let him speak, let him sort of decide when he comes in to say that. So I'll just take a 2-3 slides to understand, and I thought, this whole idea, our theme is creating the digital governance roadmap. And what we thought is, how do I go to the next chart? Next. What do we mean by digital governance? So I was thinking about it, and it's an interesting term. Is there a right definition for it? So I went to Wikipedia, I sort of did some research and all. And what I found, the definition is very interesting to sort of put a context around it. What do we mean by digital governance? And what I put in italics at the top, it's primarily, which has come from what I call, I think there's a Good Governance Institute. There's some institute called the Good Governance Institute, and it came up and said, digital governance requires boards, company management to consider how technology impacts every activity in an organization. It also says technology can be employed to prevent people from making mistakes and enable decisions to be better informed, made faster and easier, and improve accountability by recording every interaction. And I think it's a very interesting definition. So if we go back to history, interestingly, a lot of people who have grown up in India, we had the big Marwari businessmen in those days, the Birlas and all used to run, and they had their own accounting system. I come from Calcutta. The Birlas were headquartered, part of the Birla organization headquartered in Calcutta in those days. And they had a core team of 4 or 5 people of all the myriad of companies they had in India in those days. Every day they used to cover some metrics on a daily basis. And they had a flagship to know at a detailed level, plan by plan, what has happened. No internet, no ERPs, handwritten ledger books from their information to come on a daily basis. And I know there's people who used to work closely with the Birlas in those days, the finance guys, or what they call Munimjis in those days. So that is the kind of information they used to capture. So it's very interesting, there has been a culture of doing exactly what we talk about, this governance, getting information, and it is non-financial metrics also, not always financial metrics. That's the interesting point. That used to be captured. And I'm sure a lot of people here who are in the advisory business have worked with large Indian family companies and have gone through that experience. I'm sort of getting old, so I've seen that evolution over time. And I think the broad areas, what it impacts, I feel this whole digital governance area is the core process of any organization. And today, if you look at your end-to-end digitalization of your hire to retire of human capital, and I think we'll talk a theme about the human capital, how the whole digitalization journey is impacting human capital. We'll sort of talk a bit about that. Ritian will talk about it. The whole area of procure to pay, cost and operational metrics. And it is ideally about centralization of data at a granular level. So I'll make an interesting case. So I used to run many years ago an operation in various things, an operation in somewhere in Western Europe, a 2,000 people, about 1,500 people operation. And when we looked at the numbers, we didn't make money because you're looking at the financial numbers, P&L numbers, not making money. But when we did the model and when we won contracts, we were always making money. So in the service business, what is your raw material? Raw material cost is people. That is, so any service business worldwide, as we are sort of moving more from a manufacturing area to a service business, which people send, your raw material is people, nothing else. It's very important to understand that. So every time I used to do the modeling, that reported to me, I was responsible for the P&L, it's losing money, and I was getting hammered. So my bosses said, what the hell is from corporate sitting in Delhi? So the finance guy said, we should get rid of this business. I used to go to the plant. The plant managed to run it, or what you call the delivery manager, extremely capable lady, very good ratings. People like her, motivator, but money is not coming. You're making 10% EBIT losses. You remember, you're 20, 30 million operation of a division, you're losing money. So I thought something is not right. My spreadsheet model makes money if I look at the cost input, but reality is not making money. I'm sure there's a breakdown in measurement somewhere, something is happening. So what I did, and that time we didn't have information at granular level. So I got two guys somewhere from Chennai. I said, guys, you go there, you tell me I need one sort of matching you need to do for me. People coming in, that's my raw material cost. We get billed on time. Are we billing them? I said, take a week's data and give me an answer. He said, sir, how are you? We are only billing for 50% of the time. I said, what do you mean? We're paying for 100% of the people. We can allow for 10% leakage or 15%. You're saying we're only billing for 50% of the time? And the reason was the payroll systems are having on one dimension. The revenue is coming from another system based on when you are taking a call or doing a work, the client is driving. There's a huge leakage. People are not at the desk working. So the moment you go into granular level of data, suddenly the world changes. So it's a very, very important point. So people are running multiple global sites on a service delivery on people-based businesses. You should think about people being as your raw material. That's your cost. And for your effort, you're billing customers. So is there a match there? If there's a leakage, you're going to lose money. And the organizations who do that better and better, they are the ones who make money. So it's a very simple equation because there are not many other factors you can squeeze. If people is the biggest cost. You can say, well, I turn off the air conditioning. You cannot do that. It's hardly anything. It's the people cost is the biggest cost there. And I just want to talk about that. And I'll talk about also how this skill of sort of matching, going at the granular level of governance or data helps you run better business. I think that's the theme I think we should pick up both for governments as well as for companies. Customer journeys. And I think there are areas like data security, GDPR and all, which is very important. And with Rahul and all, they will talk a bit about that. And I think we want to cover in this, please, the topics are about harmonizing digital revolution with human capital, challenges and opportunities in e-governance, and understanding data securities. And I think for me, the key question, companies who have adopted better digital governance, are they more successful? Because that's it. So what is the so what of it? Why do you want to go through all this effort? So I come from the IT background. And I'll just take an example of that. Why I believe digital governance helps companies running better, more profitable. So if you look at the top 10 technology service companies in the world today, they're of Indian origin. Revenues ranging from 10 billion to over 30 billion, market cap between 30 billion to 100 billion. So that's the kind of perspective we're looking at. And they're all profitable, making EBITs between 15 and 25%. You look at there is no European major who is making more than 5 to 7% margin. Even the largest US companies are between 5 to 10% margins, EBIT, and that market cap is between 5 to what I call is between 0.2 times revenues to 1 time revenues. And the reason being, when you really go into the detail, is because it's a governance issue. Most of these companies are run on what I call a country basis. So you'll have a country P&L. You'll have 10 countries. That information doesn't go above, because you run on a service business, you run multiple delivery centers. While all Indian companies generally are run centralized global organization, or functional organization, as I call it. And there is an operation in Mexico, for example. A kid sitting in somewhere in the head office in India, for the finance guy, will be able to tell you what are the numbers. The numbers I was looking for, I give an example, will be able to pick up those numbers sitting in India. So that is what the data, the centralization of data has helped. In companies like all the service companies, let's look at when we operate in companies as professionals, we have expenses, right? We incur expenses, we have to charge you back to the company. Those are done centrally across the world. You operate in 30 countries, doesn't matter. The expense processing is done centrally. The payment might be done locally. And that's the interesting thing, which governance and data and all that help, the centralization data as well. And to me, that's a theme which is very important. Similarly, with client operational metrics. In client operational metric, you are sort of servicing clients across the world, but you have one governance framework. Against how do you run those? That's all about the centralization of data and using it with various technologies, but of course, managing data security, data privacy, and other things. I think Ross will talk a bit about in the world of how is empowering the bottom end of the pyramid, things like e-governance coming along. And I think we are going into a world where granularity of information spend will help budgeting local municipality. So one example I heard, which some municipalities are using, the municipal or what you call the councils in the UK, they all work on local budget every year, zero-based budgeting. They will say, I need to repair these roads, need this money. But today you can look at, was that road repaired last year? When was that repaired? How many holes did you cover? Because with the intersection between Google Maps and when you sort of pay the bills, you're storing the data centrally. Someone can do a bit of research and understand that. That's the power of what I call detailed data, the data lakes, new technologies coming up to sort of get better governance. And again, I think if I look at India today, the way the e-governance framework is going is, we might not need to submit tax returns. People from various sources of data, the government will be able to compute what your tax return is. So I just want to end there, and I just want to say one more point. We have covered this, So I think, where do we see the opportunity with this whole digital government experience? And I believe with people-based global delivery businesses like engineering, like technology, healthcare, I think these are where digital governance is going to become extremely important as you run this business on a global basis. I think the second theme also is, because the Indian companies have so much adopted this process, private capital from Asia is backing companies management to acquire companies across the world. And it's a phenomenon we don't see in the quoted market. It's a huge underlying phenomenon happening in the private capital markets. It's an unbelievable amount of activity. And to be fair, it is, I think, it is this whole digital jump which is all helping us. And I think the question is, hopefully we'll talk about, it is the capability of digital governance adoption hopefully leads to competitive advantage both for companies as well as for nations. And I think the current drive with the Digital India stack is exactly about that. So I'll end there. James, do you want to come in quickly give an introduction of your interesting background, and then we open it up for discussion? After
Thank you. Ross James is my name. I'm originally an Australian. Lived in Ukraine for 5 years on my journey here. Ran a development team in the east of Ukraine. was lucky or unlucky enough to be there when the war broke out. I've seen the massive changes there. When I went through university, I had a job at a very upmarket gym, cleaning that gym. It's the only time in my life I've ever had a job. So the day I left university, I started my first business. I've had a series of businesses all my life, trying to do something different, trying to make a difference. With a cloud, we are actually trying to empower micro businesses, small businesses, female entrepreneurs in the growth markets, so South Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Inclusiveness, financial, economic, are very, very important goals of our business. And I think every time I hear the word governance, I shudder. As an entrepreneur, you just go out and do, and you let other people clean up the mess you make. But and that's what we do. We want to change things. We want to make structural change so we can have sustainable improvement in income and education, that we can bring more female entrepreneurs into the market, particularly in India. There's so much evidence that with more labour, more creative female minds there creating businesses, that the economic prosperity of India will go through the roof. So we're very focused on that. And in terms of inclusiveness in our applications, in our mobile applications at the moment, we have implemented 10 Indian languages. We've done that because in some of the far reaches or in the villages that we want to help people, they're not particularly well educated. So we try and reduce barriers by minimising the difficulties, by providing the simplest applications that we possibly can. But I'd be really interested to know from the audience here, when you hear the word e-governance, what it means to you. Can anyone help me? Because I'm an entrepreneur, I don't understand any of these things. Anyone?
Can we get a mic there? I think very interesting topic here.
I think instead of keeping the records physically, we can have it in an electronic form and transmit it on the need-to-know basis to the persons required for a particular, transaction or some, documentation requirements.
Okay. I think as a corporation for us, our biggest issue is about whose data it actually is. And we see Google, Facebook make massive, and hundreds of others, make massive revenue streams and businesses out of our data. So in our platform, we are absolutely committed to saying, if you do a transaction that's in our platform, it's your transaction. That data belongs to you. You have the right to sell it, and we might take a small commission on matching you. But I was lucky enough to have lunch with the global chair of Deloitte, and was talking about this, who owns the data and how they could get their hands on it. I said, well, you have to buy it. He said, who from? I said, from the creators of the data. And he said, that's a great idea. We would buy that data because that gives us insight into the bottom end of the market and what is happening. It's like the litmus of the economy. If things are going slow down there, they can tell their big corporates that things are slowing down, or vice versa. But I think for me, when you talk digital governance, it's more about respecting who owns what. It's about really understanding that when someone does a transaction, if I sell you something, That's our transaction. It doesn't belong to Google. It doesn't belong to Facebook. They shouldn't be able to measure it. They shouldn't be able to send another advertiser in your way just because we transacted and sold a bottle of water between us. So we're really passionate about that and about making a difference in the world.
James, can I request you mention the word platform? Mention about your platform. Yeah. I think for the audience here and for the wider digital audience who are there, or 1,500 of the people online, can you outline a bit what do you mean by the platform? It's a more light to it.
Yeah, so in the platform, what we are doing is bringing
cloud platform, right?
and our cloud platform. What we're doing is bringing together both business management, tax, GST compliance, B2B trading, and most importantly, I'm going to say micro capital, because I have a view that micro lending is only one form of capital. And we've had discussions with Standard Chartered Bank and the Gates Foundation about providing genuine micro capital, so investing in a business and taking a percentage of future revenue. Now, in my discussions around some of the villages in India, people can't believe that you could even consider that. They just say, it takes us 3 trips to a village, to a lender. We get a loan, we pay 33% interest, and it's rolled over in 4 months. And I go, that's not capital of any sort. That is bridging finance from where I come from. And I think we have a responsibility to change this. And the one that I love the most and the one that we're working the hardest around is genuine micro venture capital, because there's so many enterprises in India that would take on capital if it wasn't a loan. Too many people are afraid of taking on a loan, missing a repayment, going to jail, having something taken from their property. So by shifting that to micro venture capital, they don't have a loan. They have an investor in their business to help them grow it and take future profit. Part of our philosophy is taking anything macro and then microing across the platform by digital matching, Uber style. So we've had discussions with some of the big insurance companies in Central Europe about providing a macro insurance policy for, say, mango farmers, that we could then take a fraction of that and divide it up. Also in our platform, we give the opportunity for people to create their own virtual cooperatives. So then they can buy in bulk, get some benefits there on costs. They can then together sell as a cooperative into a tier 2 city instead of the local aggregator. That'll earn them 50 to 60% more income with that one simple move. But by having a virtual cooperative, which has a blockchain cornerstone component, we know everybody that's in it and they've been building a reputation, we can also provide fractional ownership of capital items. So if a village needs a pump, everybody in the cooperative can own 1/15th or 1/20th of that pump. No one would be able to buy it on their own. But by trying to bring the standard things that happen in the physical world in communities into the digital world, into virtual communities. And I think it's something that a lot of people have really missed, that you can do that translation really, really well. And there's massive advantages for people.
Thank you. I think it's a fantastic mission you're having for the platform. It will sort of alleviate people at the bottom end of the pyramid. I think it's fantastic. Stay back here again. I'm loud enough, so I think.
Hi, can you hear me? So I think it's fantastic what you're doing, and I think you're very passionate. It'll sort of looking at what I call, I think Gary Hamel talks about the serving the bottom end of the pyramid. One of the strategies. I think fantastic, and especially for a vast country like India, and I think you go to the neighbors in Africa. I think that's what your passion is. A fantastic movement. So, Ritian, over to you. Do you want to sort of go there and talk a bit about you and what's your passion in area of governance? That'd be very helpful. We'll open up to questions after Rahul finishes. We'll open it up to questions. Please go ahead, Ritian.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Ritian. My background is in banking. I've worked with banks supervised by the European Central Bank for the past 15 years. My areas of expertise are risk management, regulatory dialogue, and corporate governance. And as opposed to some other people, governance is essentially my passion. I love anything that has to do with governance. And essentially, I will take a bit of a different angle as well, even by starting what digital governance means to me, how I interpret it, and e-governance. Basically, digital governance is about using technology for governance, and e-governance is actually using technology to facilitate or enhance or make efficient more governance. Now, what we have seen, I think, with COVID. So COVID for me was a game changer, because what it meant is it kind of accelerated certain technology innovation, right? And I have worked very close to members of the board and senior management, and what we have seen with COVID is a board on the move, right? Where basically the business had to keep on running, decisions had to keep on being made. And what we're seeing was members of the board asking for information and data, which is most of the time sensitive, on the move. Sorry.
People are attending to.
Yes. Sorry. So basically, we were seeing a board on the move and the need to have data there and then available, right? And that's what we're seeing, as in software being developed and, solutions that the board can actually, access their data and information to be able to have, board meetings virtually, still be able to make these, do this effectively in an effective manner, record keeping and everything. So that was probably one of the big changes. And there was also a lot of benefits, because the taboo of, just having to be present in a meeting, what was a bit dismantled, right? And everything was happening virtually. So that was one of the benefits, I think, of COVID, if I have to take a bit of a positive angle to that. Of course, with digitalization, challenges were brought, and I think I can summarize the challenges under three main headings, which is resistance to change, capacity building, and also then we have, of course, data security and data privacy. So if I have to go quickly through each one of them, so we have resistance to change, especially if I have to think a bit, of course, taking the angle from the board, suddenly you have members of the board who have to become more tech savvy, right? And sometimes resistance to change can also come from the fact that you are not very, maybe used to something, or comfortable to doing. However, with the fast pace and even with COVID, you don't have any other, way but to adopt, and learn. So what we were seeing with resistance to change, and even to kind of dismantle that or, address that, is actually more training to the board. We were seeing, I came across the terminology reverse mentoring, where basically members of the board were receiving, kind of more updates specific on certain topics, specifically, even related directly to tech, both from internally, from staff within the company, and also external, right? And this was also very, very true and very relevant as well to the digital transformations that the companies were going through as well. So even being, familiarizing yourself with certain concepts, certain tech innovation, which it's incredible over the past couple of years, the pace of the technology. So the members of the board had to keep up with that, There's also a lot of pressure on the boards to have diversification. And that's also from where it's coming, because maybe the boards that we had, not all the boards were, tech savvy or, how can I say, familiar with certain concepts, and they had to be brought up to speed in a particular short period of time, right? Because, as I said, decisions had to be kept on going. And what we're seeing as well, as part of the board diversification, you would have, more independent directors, for example, who would come. So if I have to talk about financial services, you would find members of the board who maybe come from other industries, who have maybe a more tech background. And that helps even the effectiveness of the board as well. So that's the board as well. The rest of the employees, we were seeing also capacity building there, and even a shift where more demand is being put on people who have, that technological information, capacity to understand technology, and implement it, support boards and the rest. And even with the rest of the employees, other employees have to be, brought up to speed. We are seeing a lot of investment in training as well. Investment in the employees, and also the employees to make them feel part of the change and not threatened by the change, right? And then to my last point, we are also seeing a lot of focus on data security and data privacy, of course, because if we are sharing information and data, you have to know. In fact, when I speak to members of the board, one of the first questions that I receive from the board members is, where is my data being stored? So that's also a very, very relevant, and has to be addressed, and it's a headache for most of the people, because if there is a data breach, there are fines, and it's a huge reputation risk as well. So basically, I think that's my angle from when I think about digital, right? I think if I have to think about what the future lies ahead, I think one of the main challenges is keeping up with all the technology innovation, especially with the we are seeing a lot of AI at the moment, and it also has caught up the eye of the regulators as well. We're seeing a lot of movement within the US. For example, there are discussions on having more governance around AI models, where there should be testing of the model before you actually deploy it in production. And there also should be, AI governance frameworks in place and all that. So it's probably that's one of the biggest challenges if I had to think ahead, and to keep up as well, even if I have to think in terms of the board, to keep up with all these challenges that are coming in. So I think that's kind of my angle a bit on digital governance.
So thank you very much. So I think what you have touched on is very interesting, because when I talk to CEOs of banks, one of the biggest issues they talk about is data security. And I remember, I think a couple of years ago, I was having a lunch with the CEO of one of the major banks in the UK. And I said, what keeps you busy? He said, our biggest issue is facing cybersecurity threats. We get attacked every day. And there's a war going on. That's the exact term he used. And very interesting. I don't want to take the name of the bank, and not the name of the individual also, but that's the fight which is going on. And these are, sometimes you can say, non-friendly countries, or also people, what I call cyber terrorists, or whatever the word you want to use, are trying to get into the security. But very relevant. Thank you very much. Let's Rahul, you want to go ahead and talk a bit about yourself and some of the themes on data security, data privacy. I think you're an expert on that, if you want to talk about it.
Hello, my name is Rahul Shukla. I'm around 20 years into IT, all been into IT. I've traveled across the globe, worked into geographies like Asia Pacific, LATAM, in particular Mexico, Singapore. I believe Singapore, when we talk about e-governance, for sure, Singapore is one model which is cutting across the globe, where you see, and a lot of people talk about that. If you want to be so seamless in your services, you want to be very accountable, responsible, Singapore is the model. If you talk about Asia, I believe Singapore is one of the biggest model which has been propagated last 2 decades. And they have established it that the way they operate, it makes sense for a lot of the population which is under the government. Been to Mexico, they are more like us. See a copy of us in certain sense, but we are far better established when you talk about being an Indian, that how the last decade has changed, shifted gears in terms of how the governance has to be done, how the governance has to be delivered to the people. because I believe the governance still was there. Right now, it is there, and it will probably far better. But the thing is that once it moved out of the files, once it moved out of a linear kind of a communication, what you're doing with whom you're delivering the product. Let's say you want to give it money to your people. Now, do you know whether you have delivered to the right set of people? Do you address to the population who are actually in need of that money? Are you able to take a systematic decision that who should be given a priority compared to which part of the the country you are governing right now? What are the priorities in general for you to spend? Are you able to listen out an opinion from the people who are actually getting benefited, or let's say who are not getting benefited? So when you talk about, I believe, e-governance, the governance stays the core, but the technology shoulders the responsibility of bettering it, delivering it to the masses, and the decisions to be done by data. Decisions is no more emotional. That means, okay, left side of, I felt they need more or they need less, and you take a call. Rather than you think about that if COVID happened, that's a very, very relevant example in past 2-3 years. You could, because you were running off a lot of data, you were able to actually take care of the health system once it was in chaos to the point where you were able to stabilize it. You are able to decide, think of, government have huge warehouses where they have metric tons of, the grains are available. But because you had certain amount of data, you took a call that by the time it get all destroyed because of the weather environment and how you're going to manage it, it's better to give it to the people, right? That's why you took the call. Think of agrarian stress in Indian market because of the still economy is dependent on the what you get from naturally available water resources. And they decided that in the peak summer, you can shell out the money to the people who are actually in need. That's going to benefit them most, because under the summer scorching heat, when the food supplies are less, if you put cash to the pocket of the bottom pyramid, you are making them comfortable. So now, if you see all these examples, the point I'm trying to make is that governance is there, but what E brings to that is that you do your decisions on data. You utilize the platforms to reach out to the masses. Think of that. Everybody has to go to the district headquarters to get their pensions signed off, to get their, the loans, getting paid off because the government thought, okay, because there was a water shortage, let's give it free to the people. But all that right now, you are able to see it in form of actual data. People don't need to come to you. Think of somebody who don't have any support, no vehicle, no car, no money. How you expect that guy to avail your facilities, even if you have a great intent, unless you allow them at their home on the fingertips? And that's what's happening, right? That people are able to taxes and all. I believe that's only for 10%, 5% population. But if you think of what benefits you're getting in terms of pensions, monetary benefit from the government, agrarian benefit from the government, getting a lot of things paid off by the government, hospitals, all kind of access you are able to do because of the digital applications in your fingertips. Having said that, if you see all things available to you, it's more like that it's all good. But we are all assuming that it's all secure. And that's where I believe when Udayan mentioned to me, I thought to bring that point, that it's not only corporates or banks or intelligence agencies who are being threatened and stressed out by the security part of it. Think of that these applications which are allowing people to interact with government in the e-governance pyramid, you are also exposing a massive amount of data in a public domain, or in a domain where the people or the consumers who are actually using the data, they are not intelligent enough, educated enough, or a choice enough for them to know that whether their entire family history details, their whatever the pattern of food you are eating. Think of that in cities. Now I can actually guess that you're going to eat pizza every third day in the month. You might go to certain movies every few weeks. You might have a choices of certain schools. You might have a certain choices of language, movies, content. I can create a persona out of you just by looking at your data. And that kind of data, if not being secure, is a massive, massive chaos. You can create a war out of it. You don't need to go war in a physical sense of it, but you can just create a chaos in a country just by, think of that. I can impersonate you, make a massive dent in your choices because I am not secure enough in terms of the data, how I'm mobilizing it. Somebody can be Rahul Shukla, with choices like I need a XY kind of a food, my medical history is this, and some other name and photo can come on top of it. I'm just taking a very layman example, but this is very, very, think of that, your credit card frauds, what's happening? People are able to impersonate you, right? Think of that, some part of time back in India, you were actually giving your Aadhaar card for everything. In US, UK, every place where I see, nobody can actually demand that kind of detail from you in public domain. Because it's sacrosanct. It's talking about your mother's name, father's name, date of birth, your, where you're staying, your address, your phone number. What else you need to impersonate me? Only 3 questions are asked in a banking world when they want to check with you, right? Your mom's name, your date of birth, and probably the last transaction you might have done. I can just be in the vicinity of you in a restaurant. I can impersonate you within no time. People who have that kind of malicious intent. So that's why security is paramount. The kind of trillion, million, whatever numbers you want to put it to the data, until you're securing it, until you're enabling people to make those choices, knowing it, that when they're accepting something on the app, on a platform, or accepting any kind of digital way of governance, they know what they're committing to. They know what they're into. So that they also know to cross-question the paradigm. Otherwise, if you're not able to cross-question the governance paradigm, you are not coming to a point where it is foolproof, where it is efficient, and where it is allowing two-way communication. It should not be that I'm getting a service, but I cannot opinionate about it. I should be able to bring it back to you. And for all that to happen, the secure mode of communication, safe mode of communication, people should be enabled. People shouldn't be just taking the consumption of that delivery. Rather, they should be enabled to go back and tell why X happened, why Y happened. In fact, if you see a very anecdotal example, nowadays when corruption happens, people do not tell this happens in a qualitative sense. They tell 3,000 crore, 500 on this day from that guy happened. Because of the data people are able to flush out in the market, right? So that means it's good, it's bad, but until you make it secure, safe, educated choices, the governance will not be to the levels what one, as a society we want it to. So you can see I'm kind of opinionated about a lot of stuff around, and I'm being into serving a lot of banking clients, so cybersecurity, threats, you see the bank, if they're spending $5 to make that money, probably $2 they have to secure it. Otherwise, they might be losing like 500 million behind it because of not enough security provided around it. So that's kind of thing what I think makes sense in terms of e-governance being such a wonderful model, but it needs to be tightened up by bringing a framework of enablement, opinions, accountability, and a secure model. So that at any point of time, you're not exposing your citizens or people to a malicious impersonation, destruction of wealth, and the trust. That is the biggest thing, because I believe there's so much of data is available. You are losing trust if you are losing your data. So that's how I'll end my conversation here. And I'm looking forward to this wonderful panel and you people. If you want to ask anything else, probably you can.
So Rahul, I think what the question you mentioned about wider information, an interesting anecdote would be Swiggy. They sort of, on some special days, they said this is the most ordered food in the whole of India. It's an unbelievable story, and you can see who ate what. They said biryani on this day, and this type of biryani and this brand is the most popular in India. So that level of aggregation happening across the whole country of 1.4 billion people, it's pretty unbelievable.
Oh, yeah.
And I think the question again is, should Swiggy be allowed to use the data to aggregate? Because as you mentioned, they can swing views across the country, right? So they might say in the portal, this is the food everyone is using, but eating, this is the most popular, but some part of the country might object to that. So those are interesting ethical questions. And I'm sure countries' government means to put some principles in there.
Just to take a cue from what example, Ross would know more than this. When Analytica happened for British elections for the Brexit style, right? That was a very visible example where this was so pivotal in bringing some kind of view to a nation to take a call. Bad, good, it's all history will tell. But do you think that the digital platforms were able to skew things in left or right, whatever they wanted? So there is a genuine chance that your opinions are not yours. You are actually being kind of manipulated into an opinion by having so much of data around
So that is very true. I think in winning today's election is for winning hearts and minds. You can today, I think you mentioned the question of personas. You can drill down to your local postcode area and you can find out what's the type of people living there. And sort of, what I'm saying, the UK equivalent of postcodes. And you can sort of hammer messages on that basis to sort of give you, it costs money, but technology is available today. So thank you very much. Before I go into some of the questions, let's talk about to the audience here. I see a lot of audience here. Let's make it lively. Questions from the left-hand side. Anirban, you have a question? Please, mic for you. Please take this mic. Please take this.
Thank you. So, yeah, I'm a professional accountant. I'm a chartered accountant and a cost accountant. And I'm the chairman of the London Overseas Center of the Costing Institute here. Hello. So I think Rahul touched a very important two things I have for you, Richen and Rahul, both of you. But before that, I'll catch up with Rahul first because this is a very personal story. You talk about data security, which is so very important. I don't know how many of you are here victims of identity theft. I have been one. Yes, so that's why I'm so passionate about it. So identity theft. There was a bank, I won't name it. So they issued a credit card. I was living in a house, in an apartment. They took the address, name is there, date of birth. They actually gave the wrong date of birth. They issued a credit card. It came in the rating because I never knew about it. They bought some £2,500. That's all the money was. But then it went to the credit rating agency. I didn't get mortgage for 7 years. So this is the impact of personal data security lapses. What I think these institutes should act. I went to the police. The police actually registered a case. They had no clue. I'm talking about 2004 at that time. They had absolutely no clue what is an identity theft. This word actually possibly came later on. But then the point is, these institutes, the professional institutes, they should actually come up with some either guidelines or supports because my gut feel is in India, there's going to be a massive level of identity theft going forward. The banks will lose, they'll not get the money, and there will be people who will. So I would request, what would be your take on this one? What do you think? How do we tackle this one?
Hello? Is it on? Yeah. Okay.
Can you just finish the response there? Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Can you rephrase the question for me to understand from the governance perspective, right? As in when it comes to institutions or banks, right? I believe.
Yeah. So how would you say what the banks should do to prevent these genuine cases of identity theft with the people getting affected? Obviously, the bank lose, but then the person, I think, gets affected more than the bank.
So in your case, you didn't get a mortgage for 7 years.
7 years, I didn't get the mortgage.
Huge personal impact.
Yeah, it is of course, it's a tricky situation. And as you said, the identity of theft happens, the thing is, probably from the bank side, there should be more awareness that these things can happen. And if, for example, of course, you filed a police report, maybe that should be something that they should be, as in that is something that should be more taken in consideration. And for example, in your case, 7 years without being able to get a mortgage, and it's not your fault, So maybe, especially the big banks, because they are very structured, they have their own rules and whatever, everything preset. So maybe that it will come eventually because more of these things are happening, and there is more awareness about cyber and, these kind of threats and everything. So most probably it's more adjusting to this kind of landscape. When it comes to security, of course, there are a lot of, we are seeing it as well happening, there's more awareness as well, even in social media, don't share card details, if you are, for example, something that I see happening, you're on a bus and you're accessing your Revolut or you're accessing, your bank details online when other people can see you, from behind or whatever, So I believe it also comes down to us as well. And even when you are putting, your information on laptops, websites and whatever, there has to be more awareness maybe the bank could also help by running more awareness campaigns, because it's about knowing more, being more aware, right? To be able to kind of, protect yourself, oneself as well, right?
Rahul? Different slant on it?
I would say the kind of expenses a lot of organizations, banks, or anybody who is into any kind of e-transactions in any fashion, it could be policy delivering or money for that matter. The time has come where people have grown out of the first layer of digitization. That means you want everything digital, it's been done now. Now the time is to manage it. And I believe the expense to be done has to improve, not only in sense of quality, but I believe there is a massive requirement for people to think thoroughly that it's impacting lives, not in just discrete sense of one or two, but it could be eventually letting into a chaotic situation if you don't put right kind of measures, guidelines, as you said so. And I believe more than everything, if you are enabling people with right kind of information, because I tell you one thing, I can read a book, I know my constitution, but do I remember it every day in that? No. Until I get into a situation, I want to contest it. So that's why if I enable you with right set of information, more intelligent information, train you to extend in a seamless fashion, probably you might be better equipped to handle it. So that, apart from what checks and balances I built into my system. So my point is two-way. One is to prioritize expenses, to actually address it. Don't think it's like one of the cases. And second is to actually train, make people educated enough about these, so that it doesn't happen like that out of a boardroom, just one guy tell you a story, but it's happening with 10 others. They never knew that this was a story. So that's where I see it.
Question from here.
Yes, hang on. Sorry.
No, I'd like to add something,
Please,
please, if you don't mind. So I think great sympathy for what happened to you. The other side of that is I suffered identity theft 7 years ago, and in the physical world. This wasn't digital, it was physical. And they used copies of all my papers to create a bank account in Australia and try and transfer all our corporate accounts from Melbourne to Sydney, where they could have controlled them. Now, that got picked up and it never happened. But as a result of that, there is a red flag against my name, which they said will be there for life. So whenever I try and do anything, they say, go into a branch and identify yourself. I said, you're joking. I'm 20 hours away. And the same thing in Ukraine. So great inconvenience to you, 7 years, lifetime inconvenience to me, where I can no longer manage effectively my corporate or personal banking.
Come on. I think a unique example. Please.
So good morning. I am CS Dr. Vedul Gopinath and I'm an arbitrator. Anyway, this is a too technical a subject to make any comments as such, but I wish to share a few points.
Please.
As Mr. Guha has said, rich families of India, still they maintain manual accounts and closing the accounts on Diwali. All the traditional way of doing things is still going on in some rich families.
Okay.
People are very apprehensive of data theft or data misuse. The policing is done by CBI and other agencies. I'm wondering whether, like insurance regulatory body, there could be a digital regulatory body, so that this business community will be safe at large. Thank you for this opportunity.
So I think that's a fascinating question, and it's more of a policy issue. And definitely as data so data is becoming very important, and we have two examples, one from Anirban, one from James here. And though it was not digital, but I think that data is there has to be some sort of control and regulation around that. There is no debate. And you're right, digital transaction always leave an imprint. You're writing in paper, you can tear it up. In digital world, and the more we go into a blockchain world, there is an imprint of everything. And that is where that fear is there. And I would always use this word, maybe in a controlled sense. It's all about, I'll come from a different world. We talk about KYC. Every bank in the world is looking at KYC, and I've been involved. I think a couple of people here have been involved in the world of KYC, especially with banks. But if you look at the real rich families, as you say, they don't want to standardize their KYC because they go through different vehicles across different jurisdictions. It's all about fundamentally about protecting your wealth and tax avoidance, not evasion. But you know, there is a fine line between avoidance and you come from the arbitration world. There's a fine line between there. So people have to be very careful. And you're right. I think it is not even a national issue. I think definitely at a national level, but the major countries have to come together to form some policies. Let me hand you over to Rityan. You might want to add something.
What I will just add, and that's to my other point as well about awareness. Okay, regulation can come out, guidance, frameworks. There are many of them. But I think in the end, it also comes to the individual. For example, I was reading, I came across something, and remember, digital is not only written information, it can be images. So I came across something, and so from a photo that someone uploaded on Instagram, there were the details of the car details on a table. There was an envelope with the detail, the name and everything. And somehow the data was actually stolen from there and then of course used, to card fraud and whatever, So I think we are in an era that digital is all around us. And I think it's still up to us. And especially we that come from the corporate world, we should know better, right? Because we deal with cybersecurity and everything within the corporate entity that we work with on a daily basis. So we should do more, I think, on an individual basis as well.
Thank you. Anyone? Can you be quick about it? I want to take in more questions.
I will tell you just funny thing.
But can you
just 1 minute. It's funny, so just 1 minute. So what happens if you go to any corporate banking, any service industry, they ask, like I used to work for TCS earlier, and they've got 600,000 people under their umbrella. What they do is with everybody who is in the organization, they are supposed to go through a video course where you touch upon, identify what potentially could be a threat to the organization, financially, physically, because it's a physical health and everything measures. And they ask you to check and all that. Now, an organization of that repute and that kind of money at stake, they're able to train people because the money at stake is huge. You do one mistake and you're penalized for life. You might not get businesses. Your reputation is at stake. Similar kind of things, we must be able to do it for the larger audience who are the consumer of that digital channel, platform or services. That's what I see, the potential could help. Yeah.
Question from this side.
Yeah, hi. My name is Sudhendra. The kind of digital footprint that we are leaving today, I think it's all over the place, and it's quite scary at one level, as many of you have shared your experiences. Over the last few weeks, I'm sure all of us are also aware of the several WhatsApp calls that we keep getting from weird numbers. And I believe the latest mode of phishing is that you don't even need to attend that call. A missed call is sufficient to access your data, is what I'm given to understand. So at one level, these are very scary times. And if this is the condition for individuals, less said the better about corporates. So while on the one hand, there is this increased craze or run towards digitization, there's also the perils that come with it. So, and obviously, I think as was mentioned, the crook is always several steps ahead, if not one step, several steps ahead of what we can do. Regulation or having a statutory oversight over this, I think might be one step, but it perhaps is not the answer because the regulation will never be able to catch up with the recalcitrant guys. So I know it's difficult to hazard a guess, but typically what should we be doing in the days and years to come? It's quite scary, when we look at it.
So let me say who can take this question, because it's a very involved question, because it's not only what you're talking about today is not about digital policies. It's the technology and advancement of, if I use the word, the crook or whoever is trying to be ahead of you. So that's a race. That's what I call the digital arms race, which is going on one side by the crooks, on the other side, organizations and sort of, whosoever the telephone companies who are providing us as consumers the stuff. So that's a fight which is going on. And I think, this is my personal view, I like to get the other panelists' view. We definitely need to have policies, but I think there is a moral obligation, or so the providers of our services are providers. So if you're using a mobile phone manufactured by someone and there is a carrier company providing that service, some form of the liability has to pass to them. Because it is beyond us as individuals to fight that. I mean, you talk about that. Let's look at governments. You've heard of Pegasus. You've heard of some of these things. They can hear WhatsApp calls today. Even the UK government today is buying some, we get to know because we're in the technology world, they are looking at packages, and the reason is they have all the good intentions. Their intentions are good because they want to sort of say, are people, doing fraud in claims and benefits, and because the government gives so much claims. But at some point, there might be bad actors who cross the line and take over your data. Anyone want to add anything? Rahul, Prityan, James?
I think to that comment, remember when we had the wave of the internet, right? So everyone was like, okay, the internet's coming, and there was a lot. I compare nowadays more with those days, right? So I think it's a matter of, and what we're lucky now is from the other side now that we have a lot of data available. So I think it's a matter of keeping oneself updated. And you have to, because there are so many changes, not even probably the people who are into tech are, keeping up. But I think trying to read, learn, keep up to date, that's what we should be doing, And again, it comes on the individual per se,
James, you have anything on that? So can we have we have 3 men, questions from 3 men. Any women, any ladies want to ask some questions from that side? This side, any ladies want to ask some questions? Please, we have 2 hands up. Please, mic there.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your inputs, the panel. And there is a question rather,
please,
and a comment also, which is coming out of my own experience in the organization. I'll tell you a very small example about the regulatory thing in India. There were some mails which were coming to all employees saying that I'm your MD. I mean, the MD's email ID mentioned, and I need you immediately to call me on this WhatsApp or something like that. It's been happening. It was happening in 2021. So immediately my, IT department called me, being a legal head, would you guide us how to handle this? I said, you simply, have to complain in cyber cell. So if you have to go to cyber cell in India, there are cyber cells in every state. You have to write a complaint. Somebody has to be a complainant. Even before the fraud has been committed, you have to physically go and then you have to file it. There is no online application or complaint which you can file. So I, took down the procedure, called up the cyber cell of my state where I was staying, and asked them, is there any other specific procedure? They said, okay, these are the 4 things which you have to do, whatever was there. And I guided the IT team. They immediately refused because the complainant was supposed to be MD or somebody from authorization under MD, but because his email ID was being used. So company refused to file the application, that complaint, that we will sort it out from technical perspective, somehow blocking that email or something like that. So this is how I would say, if a corporate cannot handle it, how can an individual will handle this? Now, secondly, if I talk about data privacy, I will segregate into 2 parts. One is the personal data. Another is the data which is being created at the offices where we are working. So the offices have IT department. They can handle cyber attacks. They can have response plan. But personal privacy, when the data is sent into some app or some website, the imprint is created. Nobody can delete it. There are websites where you put the data. You cannot have any option to delete your account. You keep on writing to the website. They won't even delete your account. So somehow you will have to block the emails coming from them. Somehow you put some data, maybe your name and number. That's it. But they will, keep on haunting you. And whatever ways they might be using the data. So in that case, regulatory provisions in India or maybe in other countries also, they are not so sophisticated, I would say. Secondly, the way we have to agree to the TNCs on the app, I would say there should be an option for a non-disclosure agreement with some penalties or provisions where they can be penalized for misusing the data, calling people unauthorizedly, and the user should be able to download and protect a PDF or a copy of that NDA. That should be done. If governments can, utilize this opportunity, we can use the legal, know-how and the simple provision of a small NDA of some paragraph, a small paragraph, which may create a fear in the mind of the person who's collecting the data. I mean, if this could be done, like it's not a question from me, a thought came into my mind just because I see it's a very scary situation that data imprints are being created and people are not able to delete them.
Great question. Can we take a question from that lady there also in the pink jacket? Can you just state ma'am, can you state your name?
Yeah, my name is Girija Nagvekar. I'm a practicing company secretary from India. I have a similar question to her. See, in this digital world, every time we are doing everything digital. KYC is taken by not only by banks, every service providers, even for corporates. Now we have Ministry of Corporate Affairs in India, where it is digital, and they have every year, all the directors, they have to do KYC for themselves. We also have to do KYC. The question is of data protection. Now, even when we have a credit card and we do the transaction, immediately we get a call from the credit card operator. Can we give a credit card to you, not for this bank, other banks? So all this data they have and the misuse of the data. The thing is that way. Earlier, we were told that Aadhaar card, when we are giving, we have to cancel all the digits and keep only the last 4 digits. But after that, bank never they started the practicing of taking the full PAN card, copy of the PAN card, the Aadhaar card, but it is being misused. One of the service providers in India actually misused those documents. I don't want to name it now, but this is how my question is the data protection, the data security. What's the policy in India and abroad? How the data can be protected? Because now while traveling to UK, I was being told by my bank to download the app on your mobile, and then you can do the transaction. All these years, I have never downloaded any app of the bank on mobile because if my mobile is hacked, all my data is gone. I do the internet transaction, but through my desktop because I feel that is secure, but my mobile is not secure. So I said, people keep on saying that download the bank apps, it's more easier and convenient. But I say, if my mobile is hacked, do you have anything that you can provide me? There is no answer. So I just want to know about the data protection, data security.
I think this is a very valid question. And I think let the panel address. But I think the overall governing themes of both the questions, if I'm right, these are some policy issues which has to start taking, and maybe the institute. I'm sure we have the institute president, others here. They should take up this up as a white paper and take to the Ministry of Corporate Affairs and then find it way to MITI or whatever the organization is. And similar should happen in different countries. But why not let the panelists, who are some of them better experts than me, to address this? Rahul, Rithian, James.
So I'll tell you one thing. First of all, how you are able to walk on the road and knowing the signs and all. If you answer the question is very simple, that it's very clearly articulated, which you can understand. That means go left, go right, stop. That's how the humanity has evolved and following the rules of social norms in general. Same thing, I personally feel that the lot of products which has been built, like I'm not making them, but like the internet browsers, like the apps which you use, they always give you a jargon kind of a thing about the security. A public of a average intelligence will never understand what you mean by accepting a cookie on a website. Right? But you accept it. You give away your consent without you knowing it. My point is that mind you, I believe UK is far better in that they are insisting with a lot of big corporations to actually simplify, explain to the public that, in your browsers, how you're storing the data and all. Because once you know it, I'm pretty sure as an individual, I'll contest it once I know the problem. The problem is a lot of big corporations, a lot of solutions which are happening around the globe. They are keeping that information hidden or in such a jargon that it's think like, insurance policy, they have 1,000 lines before they say, okay. And what do you do? Sir, I bought it. You click. Did you read all those 1,000 words? It's jargonetic. You will never know in your life. And that's why so much of insurance policy never get actually paid off. because you don't have read those 1,000 lines. So my point is simplify it for the people, and that can only come once people start questioning it. I believe a lot of us are very scared of telling to and going back. And I believe digital governance is the place to do it. Give it back as an opinion, as an accountability, that you guys are not able to explain me how you're going to give it to me. So I ask you a question, give me an answer. And if there are enough people, enough questions are made, think of that. You got COVID medicines down 6 months' time, got streamlined. Why? There was uproar. There was a public chaos. People were asking questions to the government. Boss, where is my money? Where is that ambulance? We're going to get it. And they got it finally. So that means things were there, things could be resolved, but you have to make a tangible voice for it. And I believe that will only come as an individual start taking it seriously. We ourselves are not taking security seriously, to be very honest. We are clicking left, right, top, bottom, asking nothing just for comfort. So I guess as an individual, once you start questioning, like you question the quality of food, if your pizza get delivered, you cross-question it if it's not warm enough, such a basic stuff. But do you question when you use an app, you lose something? Until it comes to you, you have lost money, you are not going to make noise.
Start asking data of the network, pay money to the person who's stealing the Vietnam map, so they stop it.
Yeah.
Pay for it.
And I tell you, anything will get resolved once there is a threshold amount of opinion on that. From civil rights to financial rights. If there is a significant amount of opinions are available, government, banks, everybody takes note of that. Until it stays individual, it is inconsequential, nobody is going to put money on that. My point is, apart from expecting others to take care of you, I believe as an individual, we should upgrade ourselves in the sense of usage and give ourselves knowledge and cross-question it. I believe enough cross-question will make the dent.
So Rahul, you're talking about something like a people's movement. We have the right to push back. Correct. So I think as more people get educated and we can have public forums writing about it. But I'll give you an interesting example from the UK. This whole thing of PPI payout you have heard in the UK banks. And that's why banks in the UK, when they give you a loan and others, they're very careful. They've changed their policies. The banks have paid about 30 billion pounds in compensation over the last 7-10 years. And I know some companies who work for the banks to sort of say how we don't give payout. So they have to spend professional fee services. But the amount of payout which will hurt the banks, hurt them in their pockets, leads them to change regulations. I think very good point. Rithian, you want to add to that? Rithian, James?
I think that social power is something that we should consider always, and I think the more people that we talk to, the more people that we influence. I grew up in the 70s when Australia was fighting in the Vietnam War, and in those days it was a ballot as to whether you went in the army and went and fought in Vietnam. And university students, of course, being university students, we stood up, a whole group of us, across all universities in Australia, and we didn't register for this ballot. It meant a mandatory 5-year jail term for not registering. But the backlash, because all our parents, of course, said, hang this, we're going to change the government. And we actually got to change a government. That rule was thrown out, and ultimately, well, not ultimately, almost immediately, Australia pulled out of fighting in Vietnam. So I've witnessed social action. I've seen it in Ukraine, in the Maidan revolution in Kiev, which changed the president. Social action is real. You have to be passionate, you have to fight for it, and you have to influence everyone you can around you. If you influence 10 people and they influence 10 people, all of a sudden we have a movement and we can change not just governments, we can change corporate behaviour.
Any further questions from this side of the room? If people are nodding their heads, no. So that means we didn't do our job interestingly, so that is the topic interesting enough? Any further questions this side? Anyone? Please, Abhijit, please. Of course, you can take.
I sympathize what the lady has said, but my problem is much more deep-rooted from the organizational point of view. I belong to a group which is ultimately owned by a very rich family. And there are as many as 15, 20 trusts at the top in all different jurisdictions who ultimately, cover all their wealth. There could be a difference. Suppose you are asking for company number A, and then because of various pyramids of structure, if you are asking for every information, then I finally not only touch the trust, then all kinds of settler, beneficiary, this is all highly confidential information. My problems, before coming here, I had the same problem. And then I've come here. Now, my problem is huge. If as law firm regulated entity, you ask for my Janam Kundali, is there, no problem. Banks, etc., no problem. Lenders, no problem. But if everybody starts asking in the name of anti-money laundering, etc., and simply they are not willing to go ahead unless and until all these details, which are voluminous in nature, are given, then the whole purpose of maintaining confidentiality, creation of trust, then all gone. These are all in public domain. So this is a serious problem. My problems are twofold, to be very honest, in the interest of time. One is somebody should tell me whether I should give this to everybody or not. Okay. And the second one, how regulated they are, how they are keeping their information. God only knows. And then Panama paper comes or Paradise paper comes. All our trust details were leaked from the trust where the website, the server was hacked. What do I do? Can I take any action? No, they said you can't take any action. This is really a big problem.
So, Abhijit, I can relate to that because I have been informed for various sins for running KYC processes for some of the major banks. And it's very interesting when you really go into detail, and specifically for large banks, for the investment banking divisions. I think there has been conversations about can we create a sort of an exchange? But people who are trying to protect their wealth at the senior level do not want to get information to be made public. That's a very important point you just said. So you talk about the bulge bracket firms who sort of are sitting on the other side of the people who have this wealth. They have been mooting the idea because of cost consideration. Can we create a public sharing this information between banks? Because you trade with 5 banks, you answer the same question. I think it comes back to your point of confidentiality because it will leak somewhere. The moment you bring it to an exchange or it will leak. So this idea of this KYC and AML exchange with a lot of banks have mooted, and I have been involved in discussion the senior level, a number of those, in my view, cannot happen. It can happen at the retail level as a consumer, individuals, that's fine, but not when you're having masses of wealth. That's my view. And whatever policies policies are at national level. This is supranational. You're crossing boundaries, jurisdiction, your domicility. It's a very complex problem, this whole KYC. And that's primarily people do this. It's also a means of protecting their wealth. That's what they do. As your families become rich, that they're doing that. And you are fortunate enough to work for one of those rich families where they use that mechanism to protect their wealth. That would be my thinking. And that's the way I look at real life have problems when I've looked at this. And we can exchange interesting war stories. What happens when you do these KYCs? Anyone wants to add something, or are we running out of time, or how are we doing on time? Can anyone give us an indication? So any further question from anyone in the audience, or shall we? Yeah, last one. Anyone has any questions? Good. Any comments from you? Final comments from the panelists?
Just thanking you all for your participation, thanking ICSI for the invitation, the opportunity to be here. Very appreciative of that, and wish you all well in your journeys.
No, same as Ross. And thank you for being here. It was really nice being able to participate in this panel discussion, and we had a good participation from the audience as well. So it was really nice. Thank you. Rahul.
Thank you very much for listening us out, spending time with us, and I believe sharing and cross-questioning each other. That's the model which is going to work for e-governance if that's the topic when we started with. So thank you very much and wish you well.
So thank you very much. I think the topic was digital governance. I think hopefully, we covered digital governance, we covered data privacy. I think some of the points coming on KYC and all. But I think in terms of granularity of data at a digital governance level, both from an e-governance as well as from the company point of view, that definitely gives competitive advantage to companies who sort of do that well. The wealth protection at the top end is a different issue because that's a whole debate. But in running organizations, running governments, I think it is sort of what should happen. There is always an issue of privacy protection, which I think James is passionate about, which Ritian is passionate about. But I think you need to think of a Pareto rule. If you think of countries, is 95 or 98% of my people benefited? 2%, okay, there can be violation of personal data, but overall, I think if it is good for the country, let's follow it. And I think some of the points which was raised by the audience in terms of digital security of personal data and all the hacking, I think these should be taken as policy papers by the institute. Means the Cost Accounting Institute will be happy to work with you. Both what I call the Institute of Company Secretary and the Cost Accounting Institute will be happy to work together to collaborate on a joint paper because it's a national issue, not only in India, but across nations. So we'll be very happy to work together. So thank you very much, audience. Thank you, the organizers, for inviting us. And thank you, panelists.